I'm Chris Campion, Field Operations Specialist at Novinium, and today I'm going to show you basic steps for cable preparation, starting with what you see when you walk up to a transformer. You have a connector on your cable inside your elbow. At this point I've already removed the elbow, and now I'll begin preparing the cable. To begin with, I'm going to remove the connector as according to the NRIs. I will then remove the insulation shield and the SemiCon shield according to the template that I have been issued. After that, I will separate the conductor strands and add my wrap wire. And after that, I will be done with the preparation and can move to the connector installation. For cable preparation, I have a variety of tools in front of me. Not all of these will be used. However, the ones that I will be using almost immediately are a ratchet cutter to remove the connector, a couple of different colored markers to mark my cutbacks, the dental pick used to separate the conductor strands. I have a pair of duckbill pliers which will be useful in removing the SemiCon layer, a spool of wrap wire, 20 gauge aluminum, my tool stop used in cable preparation, as well as the accompanying insulation stripper, and finally I have a SemiCon scorer to help me remove the SemiCon. So to start off, we'll have to remove the connector so that we can re-terminate later. To begin with, you take your ratchet cutters, and according to NRI, you want to line it up next to the last crimp on the connector. Now, in this case, the crimp goes all the way to the bottom of the connector, so we'll have to remove directly at the bottom. And of course, we want to preserve as much strand length as we can, because in situations where there's not enough slack, you want to have as much play as you can. So I'm going to remove the connector, and it's important to have a nice square cut. Oop. So as you can see on the side, it's a nice square cut. The strands are, for the most part, all the same length. At this time, now that I've removed the connector, I'm going to adjust my SemiCon and insulation cutbacks. So I'll take my template that's been issued. I'll take a marker. Of course, we have two different colors, a black for the insulation, it's easily visible on it, and a silver which shows up very well on the SemiCon. So to use the template, it's a 1-to-1 scale, so we can physically lay it up against the cable, line up the connector to the connector end, the conductor to the conductor end, and now use the marker to mark my location. And it's important to double check just in case you make a mistake, or if you accidentally bump the marker against the insulation like I did. So double checking, it's actually a little bit farther back. So now I will switch markers and do the same thing for my SemiCon cutback, which is down here. And a third mark you can make is for your tool stop positioning. Since this is tied to your insulation cutback, I will mark right here for my tool stop. Now that I have all my marks, I'm going to start by removing the insulation. So I'll take my tool stop, line it up with the mark that I had. Now you want it hand tight, but you do want to make it a little bit tighter. So give it a good quarter to half turn more. That prevents the tool stop from sliding around when you're actually removing the insulation. So now I take my insulation stripper place it over. Now usually on a job site, the tool stop, or the insulation stripper will already be set to the correct blade position, but not all the time. Now if you start on a job fresh, you'll need to set the blade. So to do that, after I tighten the stripper, use your eyesight to line it up on the extruded SemiCon shield of the conductor, and then wheel it backwards. And what you do by that is you make sure that you're not actually bumping up against the conductor strands, because if you do that, you'll nick them and you'll have to start over your preparation. So this looks pretty close. So I'll begin removing the insulation. Of course, always watching to make sure that I'm not actually damaging the conductor. Now you can hold right below the tool stop to make sure that it doesn't slide. And you don't need to go super fast. It's nice, easy. Once you get good, then speed naturally comes. So just keep removing the insulation until the insulation stripper bottoms out onto the tool stop. Now sometimes you may have insulation remaining. It's most likely because the cable has a slight bend to it, so the insulation stripper was not going around in a complete circle. But to remove that, you don't want to damage the strands, so you want to lightly perforate the insulation, not going all the way through. And then using a pair of pliers, pull it off. This time the insulation has been cut back. You can use your template to double check. Just lining it up. These notches in the template are actually lined up with the cutbacks, so you can place the template directly next to your cable, and as you can see, the cutback is pretty close. After I've double checked that my template and cable is correct, now we'll remove the SemiCon. So you take your SemiCon score. What you want to do is you want to make sure that the blade is not set too deep, so that when it cuts through the SemiCon, it actually starts cutting into the insulation, because that causes physical damage, and you would need to smooth that out. And if it's deep enough, then you may need to re-terminate completely. So after setting your blade, place the SemiCon scorer onto the cable and use the line to line up where your mark is. Make sure it's set to square cut, and then wheel the score around, making sure that it's lined up correctly. You can do this once or twice, and then set it to the angle cut or spiral cut, and wheel it out to the end of the SemiCon, making sure that you don't cut into the insulation. Okay. Now that the SemiCon is scored, I take my pair of duckbill pliers or needle nose if you have them. There we go. Once you start it, you may not need the your pliers anymore. Just peel it right on down. So you want to make sure that the insulation doesn't have any marks in it. So as you can see here, it appears that there's marks. Now you can actually take a flat edge and run it over it, and you would be able to feel any cuts into the insulation. After removing the SemiCon, we now have to add a wrap wire inside the conductor strands. This allows a better flow passage into the interior of the cable, and we do this by adding 20 gauge wire. Of course, we want to match the conductor strand metal to the wrap wire metal. So the way we do this is we take a dental pick and we pull apart the conductor strand. This cable looks pretty clean. Just spread the outer layer of strands. When you're separating the conductor strands and adding the wrap wire, it's also important to coat each of the strands with a light layer of deox grease. Now, usually you can find quite a bit of deox grease in the connector that you're going to be using. So take a wire brush and dip it in there, get a nice coat on there, and actually wire brush each strand to get that coat on there. Okay. Now take maybe 2.5 inches of wrap wire. Put it around the conductor strands. You want at least 2 to 3 wraps, and that's usually good. Get them as tight as you can, and then push it down. After that, just bring the strands back up in their original strand lay. They don't need to be wrapped around like they were before. If they were, just make sure that they're in the correct order. So we just finished preparing our cable with the cutbacks of the insulation and the SemiCon shield. Now, it's always important to have your safety equipment in place. Like, for example, my rubber mat here rubber blanket is here to cover up any live electrical connections in the transformer. Also, refer back to the NRIs for full procedure details. Removing the insulation is a key component because you want to make sure that you do not damage the conductor strands. If you do, you have to redo the termination completely, as well as don't damage the insulation when you're removing the SemiCon shield. Always use your template. It is a lifeline. Use it to double check your work, as I had done before, making sure my cutbacks are correct. It'll also give you details on what components and what connectors to use during your installation.